What kind of storm brings a woman to your doorstep and an army to your fence the very next morning? That was the question Malachi Brooks kept asking himself as he stood by his cabin window gripping a warm coffee cup with shaking hands. 200 warriors stood in perfect silence along his fence line. Their painted faces caught the morning light. They did not move. They did not speak. They simply watched him like they were waiting for something. Yesterday he had been nobody. A young rancher with no wife, no experience, and no real place in the world. A man who had never even kissed a woman. Today he was the center of something he could not understand. And it had all started with nothing more than a jacket and a smile. The storm had come without warning the night before. Sheets of rain slammed across the prairie and turned the sky black. Malachi had run out to check on his horses when he saw her. A woman stumbling through the downpour. Her long black hair stuck to her shoulders. Her buckskin dress soaked through. Each step she took looked like a battle she was losing. He called out before he even thought about it. "Ma'am, you need shelter!" She turned. Even through the rain he saw fear in her dark eyes. Not fear of him, fear of something behind her. Something she kept glancing back at. "I cannot stay," she said in a soft, careful voice. "My people will worry." But the storm was getting worse, and she was shaking from the cold. Malachi did the one thing his mother had always taught him to do. He showed kindness to someone who needed it. He took off his thick wool jacket, the only warm coat he owned, and put it around her shoulders. When he did, her whole expression changed. She held the jacket like it was something priceless. Then she lifted her face and looked at him with an intensity that made his heart pound. "You would give this to me?" she asked. "Just until the storm passes," Malachi said, feeling shy under her stare. "You're freezing." She pulled it close and smiled, not a small, polite smile. A deep one that seemed to warm him more than the fire inside his cabin ever could. "My name is Ayanna," she said. "Malachi Brooks." Quote, "I will remember this kindness, Malachi Brooks." And then she disappeared back into the storm before he could even offer her a place to stay. He didn't know why she left so fast. He didn't know who she was. But something about her stayed with him long after she vanished into the darkness. He had no idea that his simple kindness would bring hundreds of armed warriors to his ranch at sunrise. Now, staring through the window at the silent army, he felt his stomach twist. They weren't attacking. They weren't shouting. They weren't even moving. They just watched him, their eyes following every breath he took. He tried to keep busy. He fed the chickens. He checked the water trough. But every time he looked up, the warriors were still there. Still silent. Still waiting. By mid-morning, more warriors arrived. Dozens of them, riding down from the hills. By noon, nearly 300 men stood along his fence. They formed a solid line from one end of his property to the other. This was not an accident. This was not a hunting party. This was not a misunderstanding. This was for him, because of Ayanna. And because of the jacket. When the leader finally approached his cabin, Malachi's heart almost stopped. The man was tall, strong, and wore a beautiful feathered headdress. His face was calm, not painted like the others. He walked with slow confidence, like a man who had seen many battles and survived them all. He stopped 10 paces from Malachi's porch. "Malachi Brooks," he said in perfect, clear English. "Yes, sir," Malachi said, trying to steady his voice. "I am Takakota, chief of the Lakota band that travels these lands. We have come about the woman." "Ayanna." Malachi's hands went cold. "What woman?" he asked, though he already knew. Takakota studied him with sharp eyes. Eyes that could tell whether a man spoke truth or lies with one glance. "The woman you sheltered in the storm. The woman who now wears your jacket." Malachi swallowed hard. "She was cold. I was just helping her." Takakota's expression did not soften. "Do you know who she is?" Quote, "Her name is Ayanna," Malachi said quietly. "That's all I know." Takakota nodded once. "She is my daughter." Quote, those 5 words hit Malachi like a hammer. The chief's daughter, the woman he'd given his father's jacket to, the woman who had disappeared into the storm. "Sir, I meant no disrespect," Malachi said quickly. "I didn't know." "That much is clear," the chief interrupted. If you had known, you would never have touched her. Malachi felt panic rising inside him. Touching her? Had he broken some sacred rule? Was he about to be punished? Was that why hundreds of warriors stood outside? "What happens now?" he asked. Takakota's eyes hardened. "That depends on one thing. Why did my daughter not return home last night?" Malachi froze. "What do you mean?" "She left my ranch. I saw her walk away." "She never reached her camp," Takakota said, "and her horse was found this morning, still wearing your jacket. But Ayana was gone." Gone, missing, taken. The warriors outside weren't here to threaten him. They were here because Ayana had vanished. And Malachi Brooks had been the last person to see her alive. What if kindness was the last thing he ever offered? That question echoed in Malachi's mind as he stood facing Chief Takakota with nearly 300 silent warriors waiting behind him. Ayana was missing. Her horse had been found. Her jacket, the jacket Malachi had given her, was still draped across the saddle. But she was gone somewhere between his ranch and her people. And to Takakota, that made Malachi the last thread of truth left. "You were the last one to see her," the chief said. "If she vanished after leaving your ranch, you know something about why." Malachi's voice shook. "Sir, she was scared, but not of me. She kept looking over her shoulder during the storm. Something was chasing her." Takakota stared at him for a long moment, as if weighing every word. Finally, he nodded once. "Then we will find what chased her." Malachi let out a breath, but the relief didn't last long. "You will ride with us," Takakota added. "You will show us where you last saw her. You will prove your innocence." "Innocence?" Malachi whispered. The word hit him like a blow. Did the chief think he had taken Ayana? Hurt her? Hid her? "I didn't do anything." "That is what we will discover," Takota said. Within minutes, Malachi had saddled his horse, grabbed his rifle, and found himself riding beside the chief at the head of a column of 50 warriors. The others stayed behind to watch the ranch and ensure no one escaped. The message was clear. No matter what happened, Malachi Brooks was not going anywhere. The trail began exactly where he last saw her disappear into the storm. Takakota dismounted to study the ground, finding signs Malachi's untrained eyes couldn't see. "She was here," Takakota said, "and she was not alone." "How do you know?" Malachi asked. "Her footprints are deeper on the left side. She was favoring one leg." "And here," the chief pointed to another mark, "a man walked behind her." Malachi felt dread crawl up his spine. She was running. "Yes," the chief said. And she was forced to keep moving, even when she was hurt. As they followed the trail deeper into the wild country, Malachi noticed something else. The warriors were tense. Too tense. They whispered to each other. Some kept watching Takakota like they were waiting for something to go wrong. Others avoided Malachi's eyes. "What's happening?" Malachi whispered to the chief. "There are 3 men who recently asked for my daughter's hand," Takakota said without looking at him. "I denied them all. 2 are riding with us now." The chief lowered his voice. "They have reasons to want her gone." Malachi's heart thudded. "You think one of your own men took her?" "I think," Takakota said, "that someone worked with enemies to betray my blood." They reached a point in the grass where the trail split. One path went toward the mountains. One toward the river. The last circled back toward Malachi's ranch. "Which way do we go?" Malachi asked. Before Takakota could answer, a young warrior with tattoos on his arms spoke. "We should split up," he said. "Search every route." The chief's jaw tightened. "No." "Chief," the young man protested, "we lose time." "No," Takakota repeated. "They want us to split. They want us lost." The young man's face tightened with frustration. "Who is he?" Malachi whispered. "Kichi," the chief said. "One of the 3 who wanted Ayana." The tension thickened. Faces changed. Eyes darted. Nervousness rippled through the group like a cold wind. The chief chose the river trail. "This one is heavier." Something was dragged or forced along this direction. When they reached the river, the muddy banks told the story. Ayana had crossed, but her steps were spaced far apart, too far for someone injured. "She was forced to cross," Takakota said with a low growl. Upstream, Kichi shouted. Chief, look! Everyone rode toward him. Stuck on a low branch was Malachi's jacket, Ayana's signal. She had left it behind on purpose. But as Malachi looked closer, something felt wrong. It was tied neatly, not snagged by accident. She had placed it there, knowing someone would come. And inside the pocket was a piece of bark with writing scratched in charcoal. Takakota read it silently. His face went pale. What does it say? Malachi asked. The daughter pays for the father's crimes, Takakota said in a strained voice. Sunset tomorrow or she dies. Quote. Malachi's stomach dropped. Crimes? What crimes? The chief looked older than he had before. A warrior from another band challenged me last winter, he said. He believes I stole horses. I defeated him, but I spared him. His name is Akacheta. He swore revenge. Malachi felt sick. You think he took Ayana? Not alone, Takakota said bitterly. Someone from my own tribe knew when she traveled. Someone gave him information. Malachi looked at the warriors. Several were avoiding his gaze, and Kichi's jaw was clenched tight, his eyes darting toward the canyon ahead. Before Malachi could warn the chief, Takakota stiffened. We are being led into a trap. The warning came too late. Arrows screamed down from the canyon walls. War cries echoed. Warriors shouted in confusion. The trap snapped shut. Malachi dropped behind a rock, heart pounding. Takakota was already firing arrows back at the attackers. Warriors scattered, scrambling for cover. And then Malachi saw it. Kichi wasn't taking cover. He wasn't fighting. He was signaling, hand gestures fast and sharp, directly toward the ambushers above. Takakota, Malachi shouted, pointing. Kichi is working with them! The chief turned just in time to see the betrayal, his eyes filled with fury. In one smooth motion, he fired an arrow that struck Kichi's shoulder and sent him crashing to the ground. The ambush fell into chaos. But through the confusion, Malachi saw something else, something that made his heart stop. High on the canyon wall, hidden behind rocks. A flash of buckskin, Ayana, bound, gagged, alive. Malachi didn't think. He ran. He climbed the canyon wall as arrows cracked against stone. His breath burned, his hands bled, but he kept climbing until he reached her. Her eyes widened at the sight of him. He cut her free. Your father is here, he whispered. We're getting you out. Ayana nodded weakly. We must move. There is another path. She led him down a hidden route behind the rocks. When they reached the canyon floor, they spotted Akacheta giving orders. Malachi lifted his rifle, but Ayana touched his arm. Give it to me, quote. She took the gun, steadied her aim, and fired. The bullet hit Akacheta in the leg. He went down, screaming. The battle shifted instantly. Takakota's warriors surged forward. The ambushers surrendered. Ayana was safe. When the dust settled, Takakota walked toward Malachi with something like pride in his eyes. You risked your life for my daughter, he said. You have earned a place among us. Ayana stood beside Malachi, still wrapped in his jacket. Thank you, she whispered. Malachi felt something shift inside him, something warm and new, something he had not expected when he gave away his jacket in the rain. What does a man do when he saves a woman once, then finds out saving her was only the beginning? Malachi Brooks felt that question settle heavy in his chest as the canyon grew quiet. The battle was over. The traitors were captured. Akacheta lay wounded on the ground, but the danger around them did not disappear. It only changed shape. Ayana stood beside him, breathing hard, her dark hair tangled from the struggle, his jacket still around her shoulders. She looked tired but strong, alive, safe. And Malachi felt something tighten in his chest every time she glanced at him with grateful eyes. Takakota, the chief, walked toward them, with the weight of 1,000 storms in his steps. The surviving warriors moved aside for him with respect and fear. You both fought with courage, he said, but we are not finished yet. Malachi swallowed hard. What do you mean? Takakota stepped closer, lowering his voice. More men helped Akacheta. They will come after us when they learn he failed. We must leave this canyon before their riders arrive." Ayana nodded. "Father, there is another trail out of here, a hidden one. The same one they used to bring me down the ridge." "Show us," Takakota said. They rode fast, moving through narrow paths and dry riverbeds. Ayana led the way. Malachi followed close behind her, keeping an eye on every shadow. Takakota stayed at the rear, watching for anyone trailing them. When they reached open ground, the immense prairie stretched in every direction, glowing under the setting sun. But something on the horizon caught Malachi's eye. Dust. Riders. A lot of them. "They're coming," he said. Takakota didn't even look back. "Ride for the ranch!" They pushed their horses hard, dirt flying beneath hooves, wind whipping through their hair. Ayana leaned forward over her horse's neck, urging it faster. Malachi rode beside her, his heart pounding with fear and something else, something like determination he had never felt before. He wasn't riding for himself. He was riding for her. As the ranch came into sight, the warriors Takakota left behind lifted their spears and shouted when they spotted Ayana alive. The line of nearly 200 men shifted instantly, forming a protective wall along the fence line. Ayana slowed her horse when she reached the yard. She slid off and turned to face her father, but Takakota placed both hands on her shoulders before she could speak. "You are safe," he said softly. "That is all that matters." Ayana's voice cracked. "I did not think I would see you again." Quote. Takakota closed his eyes for a moment, as if grounding himself in the relief of having his daughter in front of him again. Then he turned to Malachi. "You have my gratitude," the chief said. "You risked your life without hesitation." Malachi shook his head. "She needed help. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Takakota said firmly, "not anyone." Warriors around them murmured in agreement. Malachi felt uncomfortable under their attention. He wasn't a fighter, he wasn't a hero. He was just a rancher who made a choice in a storm. A choice that led him here. Ayana stepped closer to him. "You saved me," she said quietly, her eyes soft. "You climbed a canyon wall for me." Malachi felt heat rise in his face. "I just did what I could." She reached up and touched the edge of his torn shirt where rock had scraped him during the climb. "You got hurt." He looked down. His hands were scraped raw, his arms bruised, his clothes torn. He hadn't even noticed. "You are brave, Malachi Brooks," she whispered. Those words did something to him. Something deep. But before he could speak, a shout rose from the fence line. "Riders approaching!" The warriors tightened their formation. Malachi, Ayana, and Takakota ran to the fence. Dust clouds rolled across the prairie. A group of riders were coming fast. But as they got closer, Malachi saw something surprising. White men. Soldiers. Takakota growled low in his throat. "The army. They were near our land yesterday." A soldier raised a white cloth tied to a stick. "A peace flag," Malachi said. But Takakota did not relax. The men slowed to a stop 20 yards away. Their leader, a tall officer with gray hair, lifted his hand in greeting. "We're looking for a young native woman," the officer said loudly. "We were told she might have been taken by hostile warriors." Ayana stiffened. Takakota's eyes narrowed. "Your scouts asked about young native women 2 days ago," the chief said. "Why?" The officer hesitated. "We heard rumors of a kidnapping. We were trying to help." Takakota stepped forward, anger rising in his voice. "You did not come to help. You came because you believed we took one of your women, or because you wanted to take one of ours." The officer swallowed, avoiding the chief's gaze. Malachi spoke up. "Ayana was kidnapped by men from another band, and a traitor from our own. The ones who planned it are captured now. You're too late." The officer's expression faltered. He had no more excuses. Takakota lifted his chin. "Turn around. Your help is not needed." The soldiers hesitated, but the sight of 200 armed warriors behind the chief convinced them. One by one they turned and rode back the way they came. Ayana let out a breath of relief. The tension faded from the air. Takakota faced Malachi again. "You did more this day than any man could ask," he said. "You brought my daughter back to me. For that, I honor you." Then, in front of all his warriors, Takakoto placed a hand over Malachi's heart. "You are welcome among us. Always." Malachi felt something break open inside him. Something lonely. Something long, silent. Ayana stepped closer to him. The fading sun painted her face gold. She still wore his jacket, holding it closed with her small hands. "I told you I would remember your kindness," she said softly. He swallowed. "It wasn't kindness. I just couldn't leave you in the storm." She smiled gently. "Sometimes a simple act changes a whole life." She reached for his hand, and Malachi let her. Her fingers were warm, strong, alive. "You saved me," she whispered. "And you saved me," he said. She tilted her head. "How?" Malachi looked at her carefully. "Because before yesterday, I didn't have anyone. No family, no friends, no purpose. But now I have something to care about. Something to fight for." Ayana's eyes softened. "And what is that, Malachi Brooks?" He held her gaze. "You." Her breath caught. A slow, emotional smile spread across her face. She stepped closer. The warriors around them didn't cheer. They didn't speak. They simply watched with quiet respect as Ayana leaned her forehead against Malachi's chest. "Then you will never be alone again," she whispered. Malachi wrapped his arms around her, careful but certain. The jacket he gave her once in the storm now wrapped them both. The story that began with a simple act of kindness ended with something far deeper. A new beginning, a new bond, a man who found courage he never knew he had, and a woman who found safety in the arms of someone who had nothing to give except everything.